It's time for Michigan's newest sports talk show, Mitten Madness.
And here he goes. Defense win championship.
Michigan sports talk from here in Battle Creek. The latest stories, the biggest games, all across the Mitten State.
That's not something to play with.
Streaming live and on demand on the 95.3 WBCK app. Here are your hosts, Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes.
Hello there. Good morning. It's Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes set to talk Michigan sports for the next hour here on the station, and we're going to have some fun with that. There's a lot going on, NFL, college football, plus some Pistons and Red Wings stuff to get into a little bit later. We'll have our picks at the end of the show. Fun slate of games to choose from and some difficult decisions to be made there. But before we get into anything too serious, DJ, how's it going, man?
I am doing all right. You know, fantasy wasn't too bad last week. Packers played a pretty decent game, and I've just about given up on Michigan football, so I'm doing okay. I said decent. I didn't say
they
good.
Lost.
I didn't say good. I said decent, which means there were things that I saw that I liked and we can take forward in the rest of the season, and there were things that I chose to forget. Decent.
Which category did those uniforms fall under?
Oh, those uniforms fall in the we should be wearing these every week. That's
really?
That's my favorite Packers look, actually.
Oh, wow.
I like that look a lot, and I've always liked it.
I didn't like it at all.
I think it's my second favorite Packers look outside of the white cheddar look that we wore a couple weeks ago.
The all whites looked good. I'm not a fan of the plain yellow helmets. I did like the jerseys. The jerseys look good. Green pants still feels a little weird, not going to lie. But
I think I just like the helmets because they make the yellow in the jerseys pop a little bit more. I think that's the only reason I like it.
See, I think it clashes with the color in the jersey.
No, because if you wore green, it would just be too much green. If
no, I'm not saying wear green. I'm just saying just put the logo on the helmet like it's always been there. Like, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think that
or
logo,
the stripe.
I don't think the logo was there when they wore that jersey, and that's why they don't wear the logo.
Or put the stripe on the helmet. I think just keeping the stripe, taking the logo off might have been fine, but
it is a nostalgic look. There was no logo on it when we wore it.
Okay. Anyway, let's get to the real issue at hand here, and that's the fact that the Detroit Lions are 7-1. They're 4-0 on the road, and they just went into Green Bay for the third straight season, DJ, and beat the Green Bay Packers. They're kind of in a great position here to not only take control of the NFC North and the NFC, but really the rest of the NFL, because Jared Goff is that man. Jameson Williams, not available. Doesn't matter. We're going to lean on this run game. We're going to lean on Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. Oh, by the way, since this game ended, the Detroit Lions have traded for Zadarius Smith, who is set to not necessarily replace Aiden Hutchinson, but at least give this Lions team a pass rush because they don't have one without him. Everything is kind of swinging this team's way right now, and even some of the tougher games that are ahead on the schedule don't necessarily look as tough as before. The Texans, who they play tomorrow night, they haven't been playing great football here recently. The Jags, the Colts, terrible. The Bears, they've been down recently. The Packers have lost a couple of games, including this one. The Bills, that's a different story. The 49ers clearly aren't the 49ers from 2023. The Vikings have been proven, especially by the Lions, to be vulnerable. The Lions could be in a situation here where they could go on a serious tear if they're able to lean on what their offense does well and avoid some of the weaknesses of their defense, and they've been able to do that very well over the past 4 weeks despite playing mixed talent. One bad, playing the Cowboys and the Titans, two bad teams, playing the Vikings and Packers, two good teams, and they look great in all four matchups.
I want to commend the coaching staff first, because that's really what this goes back to, is a coaching staff doing their due diligence of watching film and putting together a game plan that works. And then I want to commend the team for going out and executing. I've talked about it before. It's called lie. Listen, implement, execute. I don't really tell kids that they should lie except for this. You should listen to everything your coaches are telling you about the other team and how they want you to do things. And then you should implement what they are asking you to do while you're sitting through practice. Watch your film, pay attention, and then go back and execute. The Detroit Lions have been a perfect example of that this season, and you see it has been successful. Their game plan for every single game, including the one that they lost to the Buccaneers, has been spot on and has been flawless and has helped them to success. There isn't any point this season where I feel like the Lions are trying to do something that wouldn't work. They have been putting together
that Bucs game. Goff threw like 50 some odd passes,
but
the game got away from them.
But if we want to be honest, one, it got away, but not really too much because it was a 2016 game, and it wasn't like it was ever this insurmountable.
They were just throwing the ball
like,
too much. That's all it was.
I don't even think they were throwing the ball too much. When you look at the Bucs D, the Bucs D is set to stop the run. You have to beat them through the air. They went,
and they've
with
got
the
good
game
defensive
plan.
backs too.
They have good DBs, but still, if you have solid receivers, they're going to get open, and then you get to soften up the zones, and then you can run after you've been successful in the past. That's what the Lions were doing. They just couldn't get the pass successful enough to set up David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs to have good days on the ground. But their game plan was still there, and if it had been successful, they would have been able to come out of that game on top as well, and they almost did, even still not necessarily having their game plan go the way they would like it to. So I'm not really concerned with anyone on this schedule except for the 49ers, and I only say that because that game's on the road. If that game was at home like the Bills game is, I would have a little bit more confidence in the Lions. Not that I don't believe that they can go into Levi Stadium and come out with a victory, but it's going to be tough. It's a lot easier to play those kind of games at home. That one's on the road, but I do still think that realistically the Buccaneers may be the only team that beats the Detroit Lions in the regular season this year.
It wouldn't surprise me if it went that way. Something I want to point out here. Against the Packers, Jared Goff, 22 pass attempts, team rushing attempts, 32. Against the Titans, Jared Goff passing attempts, 15.
We're not going to
team rushing attempts 24.
Don't do that with the Titans.
I'm just going over this 4-game stretch because they have performed well against good and bad teams.
Yeah, but the Titans shouldn't count. They're a dumpster fire of an organization.
Against the Vikings, 25 pass attempts. This is the closest game. 27 rush attempts. And against the Cowboys, 25 pass attempts, 36 rushing attempts. The way that the Lions have kind of looked at what the NFL has been for the past several years, and the fact that they've got the quarterback who everybody's chanting his name and putting him in the MVP race. And don't get me wrong, he's in the MVP race. I think he's right there with Josh Allen, and after Thursday night, Lamar Jackson. But the way that they've leaned on the running game with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, like these dudes aren't even hardly rushing for 100 yards ever. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs did it against the Vikings and the Titans. Like you said, the Titans are what they are. But the way that they've been able to take the Lions back to 2007 or 2004, the LT and Priest Holmes days where you just turn around and give the ball back to your running backs 30 times a game. And it's paying off, and they're the best team in football right now. Because everybody's looking at the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are undefeated. The Chiefs are not 8-0 good. I think the Chiefs have gotten very, very lucky in a lot of circumstances. The Lions have taken on a wealth of challenges, and outside of that Buccaneers game where, again, it got away from them and they threw the ball 50 some odd times. Since that game, they've clearly redirected to the point where we're not throwing the ball 50 times unless this turns into an actual shootout, and we have to rely on Jared Goff in that way, and we know that we can if we have to. But being in the situation where you don't even have to do that because you can control the football game and not, that shortens the game for your defense, that shortens the game overall, and it just, you wear out the other team too when you're able to run the ball like the Lions do. And it's, to me, that's one of the most impressive things about these 2024 Lions is even last year, the offense was a little bit more reliant on the pass than it is this year, and it's somehow making the Lions look even better. On top of the whole, the locker room environment and the brotherhood that they have, it's certainly very special, and it's something to keep note of as they head into this Sunday night game against the Texans.
I just think there's going to be some teams that they run across where they're not going to run the ball as well. I think the Packers game, there was some times where they didn't run the ball as well. I think the Bears team, those games will give them some real tough problems on the ground. They're a very solid team in the front seven. So there's going to be some games this year where they're going to be expected to throw the ball a little bit more, but realistically, they're going to lean on that run game as much as they can, and they should. They have the front, the front lines to do so in terms of their offensive line. The front five is fantastic. You have good blocking tight ends, and then you have running backs that are not afraid to drop the shoulder pads and lower their level, but also are shifty on the outside and can burst off for big runs. So why not take advantage of that?
I would like to point out that take away the negative rush yards from Jared Goff and Khalif Raymond. The Detroit Lions rush for over 4 yards a carry and 138 yards against your Packers.
I said at times.
At time, everybody gets a stop at the line of scrimmage every once in a while.
It wasn't every once in a while, though.
It's
That's
consistency.
Watch the game, then talk to me.
Okay.
There's
I watched the
over
game.
Here. This dude.
With the Texans, a lot of their problems have been offensive. Their defense is one of the best in the NFL, and we are going to pick this game a little bit later, so we don't need to get too deep into it. And the game's also, going to be on BCK tomorrow night. How do you take what the Lions have defensively and say, yeah, they're going to continue to make C.J. Stroud's sophomore season difficult? Because he's had his struggles. A lot of that has to do with his weapons getting hurt. He's without Nico Collins. He's without Stephon Diggs. And Tank Dell hasn't been quite as good as he was in his rookie season before he got hurt. So a lot of that kind of plays into it. Joe Mixon's still playing really well for Houston, but there's still the bulk of the Lions' problems do exist on their defense. Zadarius Smith is not going to come in and be some world eater who completely fixes this entire thing. How do they handle that situation in prime time where CJ Stroud is looking to get back right?
Everybody's crazy saying the Lions defense ain't good.
I'm not saying they're not good. I'm saying that's the weakness of this team.
It's not. There's no real weakness on this team right now. 14 points, 9 points, 13 points, 16 points, 20 points. That's how many points they've given up in 6 of their 7 games this year. They have 2 games where they've given up 29 points.
Those are against good offenses.
That's the point I'm making is they're not playing anyone. And I'm sorry, a Texans team with no receivers is not someone I'm scared of putting up 1,000 points on the Lions.
That's true.
This is not a game where I think that is a concern. I think their concern is handling the ball and not giving them easy and short fields. If they turn the ball over, that's the real concern this week.
Oh, and that's the dangerous part is because that's something the Texans can do. Texans have a ferocious pass rush led by Will Anderson, Roll Tide. But also on top of that, I think you did nail it. You approached this game the same way you did the Packers, where you don't allow your weakness to be exploited. There's weak links on every team, even the Lions. Control the football with your rushing attack. Get that established, I think you'll be all right. We'll pick that game later when our picks come up at the near the end of the show. But coming up next, we're going to talk some Big Ten football as well as what's going on with the latest with the Wolverines and Spartans here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WB. Back here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK, Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes. It's time to talk some Big Ten football. We'll start with the schools here in Michigan who are having a rough go of it. Michigan State coming off the heartbreaking loss to the Wolverines on the road. They got to host the Indiana Hoosiers, who, by all intents and purposes, though they have 2 weeks to prove it, look for real. Curtis Rourke threw for 263 yards and 4 tutties as the Hoosiers routed the Spartans 47-10 to start 9-0 for the first time in program history. We'll talk about Indiana here in just a little bit. But Sparty's on the skids, man. They've got 3 games left. 2 are a little bit more winnable than the other. Next weekend, they will take on Illinois. And then they close out with Purdue and Rutgers. There is still a shot here for them to be bowl eligible at 6-6. I'm not so sure. I feel like a lot of teams are about to go 6-6. There's not going to be enough bowl spots for everybody. More teams are losing more games than they tend to, based off of the expanded playoffs and the expanded conference realignments. But nonetheless, what's your take so far on Sparty and their chances against Illinois next week, excuse me, and everything that they've kind of got going on coming off of, that Michigan game they felt like they could have won, but that Indiana game really gave them a dose of reality just how far off they are.
Yeah, I think that they have the easier of the games between the 2 teams in the state this week. I think they do have a chance to beat Illinois if you can get at Illinois in the pressure game and kind of make that quarterback make some decisions on the move, and then kind of stifle the run game a little bit and stack the box in some opportunities when you feel like they're going to run. You can really put some pressure on their defense to be successful. And that's where you saw Michigan kind of push the pill a little bit there with Illinois a couple weeks ago when they lost 21-7. Is there were times where their offense couldn't get anything going and the defense was constantly on the field, allowing Michigan to get a little bit to go. So if Michigan State is able to get Illinois in a position where they're not getting an offensive groove going, then they may be able to stay competitive in this game. But I do believe that Illinois will find themselves on top once they're able to get going and have some offensive momentum throughout the game.
For sure. On the Michigan side of things, they get to play Indiana this week, and that's not going to be particularly easy, especially on the road, and they're staring history in the face. They've never been 9-0 before. They've never been 10-0 before. They've never had the opportunity to look at the rest of their schedule and say, even with a loss to Ohio State, we're in prime position to make the college football playoff. The turnaround in Indiana was ridiculously fast, but so is the turnaround in Michigan. They're 5-4, and with Indiana and Ohio State remaining on the schedule, it looks like the Wolverines could also be headed towards a 6-6 record. Northwestern sandwiched in there between the two teams to the south. Assessment on Michigan after getting torched by Oregon last week and now having to face another top 10 opponent with lofty postseason goals.
It just hurts. It hurts trying to, make it throughout this season and come down from the highs that the team and the fans were on last year is a tough break. Last year was a year that a lot of us have been waiting on for a long time, and it felt great to experience that. And now we're experiencing the lows of watching a very good team move on. Coaches, players, other pieces that are involved with the program have moved on, and you have to try and resemble what you've had in the past. But, with 4 losses already, you're looking at a very tough outlook for you. You have to play an Indiana team that has been playing amazing football this year and is looking to get themselves implemented in the first college football playoff in terms of the 12-team playoff and could very well do that. A win against you almost guarantees it for them because of what their schedule looks like throughout the rest of the season. You have an opportunity to almost guarantee yourself a bowl game. You win this game, you beat Northwestern. That's 7 wins. That's 7 wins. You're probably in a bowl game at 7-5. 6-6, it gets a little more tough, and there's a lot more competition rolling around at 6-6. 7-5, you're probably in. So this is a huge game for not only Indiana, but for Michigan as well. But I don't feel confident going into this game one bit. The offense has had no kind of rhythm going at all in any game this year. Even when you put up 30 against Fresno State, 28 against Arkansas State, the 27 that you put up against Minnesota at USC, and then the 24 against Michigan State, none of those games looked good. None of those games looked like we had a grasp on our offense, except Khalil Mullings, who has been an absolute star throughout the year. Colston Loveland is probably still tight end 1 throughout the country. Other than that, this team looks very bare bones on the offensive end. That's not going to change miraculously over the weekend against Indiana, but if you're able to put some pressure on Rourke in the backfield, force him to get the ball out quickly, and then make plays while the ball's in the air, you got a chance in this game. If you don't, they're going to stretch you out, and then they're going to be able to run right up the gap too, because now you're worried about stopping the receivers and their tight ends while also trying to stop the run game. That's a tough thing to do. You got to get at Indiana early. If you let them get the first punch, you're already knocked out.
DJ, I got a question for you. Do you know how many games Indiana has scored at least 30 points?
I think all of them.
Every single one of them. Do you know how many games Michigan has scored at least 30 points?
1.
Once. Michigan is one of the worst teams in all of college football. 21 points per game. And their defense isn't nearly what it was expected to be. And it's tough to be a great defense when your offense is so putrid. But Michigan gives up 23.3 points per game. It's almost a guarantee that Indiana is going to score at least 30 once again for the 10th straight game, at least through this season. Not tough did last year, but that is just a tough challenge ahead for them. But when it comes down to that, Indiana is really in the driver's seat here in the entirety of the Big Ten. They stand at the top of the standings alongside Oregon. They don't have to play the Ducks unless they make it to Indianapolis, at which point would be quite the setting for them. But they do play Ohio State after playing Michigan. And before the season, you would think that would be a very difficult back-to-back task. You still have to go in, you still have to play Michigan, you still have to beat them. Ohio State, on the other hand, They've got an extremely easy schedule down the stretch. Their final 3 games with Purdue this week, Northwestern, and then they get to Indiana, and then they close out with the game against Michigan. But for Indiana, they're almost in a space, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, where if they beat Michigan and they just don't lose 40-0 to Ohio State down there in Columbus, they're probably still a top 11 team.
But I mean, even if they do
still make the playoff,
even if they do lose by 40, they are.
I think they'll drop far enough.
Why? You lost to the number 2 team in the country by 40, and that makes
that's
you
a lot. That's a lot.
Okay, and
teams get punished for that,
and there aren't other teams that have been blown out already. I'm sorry.
And they drop.
Them getting a one loss blowout to one of the best teams in the country is not enough to drop them out of the playoff. And if it does, that's egregious.
I'm not
egregious.
They're number 8 right now. Okay,
which they should be higher.
They should be higher. I agree with that. The win against Michigan is not going to exactly launch them into the top 5.
I don't want it to.
Right,
but there has to be true value for playing Ohio State as a top 5 team.
I agree. If you play them closer. Even if you lose by 5 or 10, then you're in that kind of territory where you might be somewhere around 10 to 13 in those rankings.
Didn't Texas get blown out by Georgia?
Yeah.
How far did they drop?
They didn't lose by 40.
How far did they drop?
You'll have to tell me.
They dropped quite a bit. I think 4 places, maybe 5. They didn't drop out of the top 10. Because they played another top 10 team.
They were the number 1 team in the country.
I don't care.
We're talking about a team that
don't care. They played another top 10 team.
Because
no.
All of this matters. Texas was 2 plays away from going to the national championship last year.
That's last year.
And has played like the number 1 team in the country at times this year.
Cool.
Indiana has never been in this space before. If they go into Ohio State and flub it up, they're going to get dropped out of the top 12 and they're not going to make the playoff.
That's ridiculous.
I'm not. It's not my opinion I am speaking
It's
of.
ridiculous. That's all I'm saying.
This is me saying this is what should happen.
What I'm saying is
that is precedents that have been set in this sport for years.
As the entire Big Ten, if Indiana drops that low, we riot. That's egregious. This team is more than good enough.
I mean, we're talking about losing by 40, not by 10 or 15.
Oh yeah, but even
Texas did get manhandled by Georgia, but they didn't lose by 40.
Even if they lose by 20, close to what Georgia lost by, or what Texas lost by, they shouldn't drop out of the top 10.
There's a barrier somewhere.
They have thoroughly dominated everyone on their schedule, and then they lose one game by 20 points, and now they're not a top 10 team to another top 10 team. Not even just top 10, top 5.
Nobody on their schedule is currently ranked.
That's why they thoroughly blew them all out.
True. No, I agree with that. You got to go the Boise State way. If you don't play anybody, beat the hell out of them. And that's what they've done. And their coach had experience with that at JMU. Like, they understand what it takes to garner the respect. But you have to put up and perform when you play that perennial blue blood who has been there before, has played tough games, and lost to the current number 1 team in the country by a single point.
To me, 20 or less, they stay in the top 10. 20
I hope
or
so.
less, they stay in the top 10.
I hope so. If we're being honest, I want them to beat Ohio State. I would love to see Indiana and Oregon because here's the thing. Ohio State, they don't have to do anything. Ohio State's in the playoff. I don't know if people realize that or not. As long as they don't lose to Michigan, they're in the playoff. And let me tell you what ain't going to happen.
Okay, but if they lose to Indiana, are they dropping that low?
We got to take a break. That was a lot of fun. We don't often get to do that. Hey, so I guess shout out to Michigan and Michigan State for not being all that great this year so that we can have a chance to talk about the Big Ten. I'm sure we'll get to do it a lot more in the coming weeks. But we got to take a break. When we come back, it's time for Pistons and Red Wings here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK.
Detroit sports fans, Wolverines and Spartans alike. This is your sports show, Mitten Madness, with Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes on 95.3 WBCK.
All right, we're back here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. Yes, DJ and I still debated about AP top 25s and college football playoff rankings all throughout the break. But we do have to shift gears and start to talk about the Detroit Red Wings, who are currently 6-5 and 1, I guess is the way that you would read that. And with the one overtime loss, they've got back-to-back wins. For us, we don't know the outcome of the Maple Leafs game, recording ahead of that. But nonetheless, good win over the Sabres and the Blackhawks to skirt a 3-game losing streak, trying to get back in the win column. And it's been a pretty up and down, rocky road type of season for these Red Wings, not getting off to quite the same hot start. Now, last time we talked about the Red Wings, we were kind of gushing over the goaltending that this team was putting up. And again, Blackhawks and the Sabres both just 1 point apiece, but those losses did kind of let a few get into the net. So, I mean, coming off of this kind of strange week that the Red Wings have had to the start of their season, I mean, where's your kind of confidence level for a team that's ranked just 21st in the ESPN Power Rankings?
I think it's fine right now. It's early season still. You're getting your skates back under you and really getting out and moving. It's literally just a month into the season. I think things really start to heat up in December and January. That's the time where you want to start to be playing some good hockey as you get into the All-Star break, and then you can come out and really kind of use that break to look into yourselves as a team, find out how you want to attack the rest of the season, and then make your playoff push. So I think it's really just more of getting comfortable again and figuring out some new lines and how that chemistry is working between each other as some new pieces have been brought in. But I wouldn't fret too much. It's early season, and really the runs here, as you can see, a 3 in a row, then you lose 2 or lose 3, and now you're on a 2-game win streak again. Maybe you win this game against Toronto, you're back at 3. Or last night, if they win, they're at 3 already, and then you have a game against New York. Tonight you win that 4 in a row, so there's a chance for you to kind of put some momentum here, but really you don't want to be playing really good hockey until about March.
So looking at an ESPN article, it's kind of trying to detail how real some of the teams in the NHL are. The Detroit Red Wings are kind of somewhere in the middle, and it's because of inconsistencies and not building upon the successes from last year. Now, none of the things that we have praised about this team early in the season are necessarily mentioned in this blurb. It's most of the negatives about how the Red Wings are near last in 5-on-5 goals, just 15 ahead of Anaheim and Nashville. Their power play goals tend to help boost their overall goals per game, but they're still ranked near the bottom of the league in scoring, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that they don't get off a lot of shots in 5-on-5 hockey, and last year they didn't really do very well with that either, and even when they do get those shots off, they're not of the highest quality. So it's more of an offensive failing at this point. It's almost mirroring what the Tigers were going through, where they could, when their defense was able to play so well, they were able to stack a few wins. But when their offense was just so anemic that they couldn't get going, that's where the problems existed for the guys that were playing on the diamond. But these guys on the ice, man, they're struggling just to get the opportunities to put points on the board.
I think offense and defense in hockey are so weird because it all just runs together. So I think the bigger thing is controlling the center of the ice. In between the blue lines is where you want to be winning the game. And I think they've had some trouble with that. And that's kind of the trouble that led to them missing out on the playoffs at the end of last year, and it's crept into this year. The turnovers in between the blue lines and how they've been handling the rush with their forecheck or their back check has been their real concerns. If they're able to clean that up, I think they're able to get a little bit more puck time down in their zone, which equals more shots and has an opportunity to equal more goals. The less time it's in your zone or in the neutral zone, the better chance you have of winning the game.
Pivoting over to the Pistons. The Pistons have already won 3 games this year. Hey, look, 3-6. I think you could have sold that to a lot of Detroit Pistons fans and then been like, okay, that's a pretty stark improvement. All by the way, Milwaukee's off to a 2-6 start. That's not going to be indicative of how their season is going to end, I don't think. But you've at least got a couple of things to be happy about early on in the season if you're a Pistons fan.
Yeah, I think the loss to Charlotte is troublesome. It was a 1-point loss, so it's not terrible, but
you want to win the games that you're supposed to.
You got to be beating teams like Charlotte, but after coming off a win against the Lakers, it kind of makes sense why that game was a little bit closer.
Right.
You beat the Nets right before you played the Lakers, back-to-back Sunday, Monday wins. That's awesome for you, but a 30-point loss to the New York Knicks is a problem.
The Knicks are not bad.
I mean, I'm not saying they're bad, but they had just beat the 76ers 2 days ago by 10, and you look at the rest of their scores, even when they're losing by single digits. So to go out and lose by 30, that's not good. That's not something you want to see.
But you rebound from that pretty well.
You did rebound from that with 2 wins and then a 1-point loss. So I don't think it was a derailment, but it's something to keep an eye on, kind of looking back. Like, I kind of want to go back and watch that game now and go, what is it that happened? Like, I want to see what led
Jalen Duren left the game. That could be some aspect of it.
That could be part of it. But, looking back, it's just like you want to see what went wrong on both sides and if that's something that could be an issue later in the season. But realistically, 3-6 is a pretty solid start, and they're competing in these games against Boston, losing by 6. Newsflash. They're defending NBA champions.
Right.
Hello. Miami, who's a perennial playoff team, you lose by 8. You beat the Sixers, who are a perennial playoff team. You lose by 6 to Indiana, who was in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. You're doing well, and you're competitive against teams or even beating teams that people feel you shouldn't even be in competition with. So keep heading down the path you're on, and I think things will be okay for the Pistons, and they have a solid chance as of right now, both mathematically and vibe-wise, to hit that 28 marker or even exceed it like we've talked about.
Pistons are currently ranked number 28 in the ESPN Power Rankings, and that doesn't account for the loss, the buzzer beater loss, by the way, to Brandon Miller and the Charlotte Hornets. And by the way, Brandon Miller, Roll Tide. Nonetheless, when you're in a situation with Jalen Duren leaving the game with an ankle injury, not so sure if he's going to be available for the Hawks game, which again, we don't know the outcome of that one, or the Rockets for that matter. What should necessarily be the expectations based off of this start? 3-6 isn't some miraculous start, but this is the Pistons we're talking about. If we're talking about just doubling wins, you're already on pace to far exceed that. But I mean, how do you temper your expectations when a young team is playing good teams well, and winning some games that they should be able to compete in, taking advantage of situations such as the 76ers not being fully ready here at the start of the season, and getting that win over the Nets, taking advantage of the Lakers at home, and just dropping a 1-point game to a Charlotte Hornets team that is very much on your level. So at least, you're keeping things regular, I guess. How do you temper those expectations, though, when you're looking at the schedule coming up ahead and you're like, man, I wonder, how do these Pistons continue to stack wins? Should that even be the mentality of Pistons fans?
I don't think anybody has expectations for this team. And I think most people's expectations are on the floor. A lot of people don't have a high ceiling for this team. So I think a lot of people are taking the excitement for what it is and taking the positives and running with them in a positive way and saying, hey, you know what? We beat the Lakers, and I'm happy about that. And when we get another win, we'll be happy about that one too. But the team, they're just solely focused on getting better. And you can see it, that they're looking at the game, they're asking questions, they're going out giving their effort every single time, 110% of it. And that's really all you can ask for from a young team.
For sure. All right, we're going to head to break and I guess spare a few seconds extra for our picks, and that's what's coming at you next here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK.
95.3 WBCK.
Here at Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. We've had fun discussing everything going on in the world of Michigan. Now it's time to branch out and make our picks for the week. 6 of the biggest games in all of football. Plenty of good games out there to keep us away from the other sports. It's that time of year, so we're going to dive into those in just a bit. But DJ, what is the updated scoreboard after last week?
So our flip games went opposite of each other. We both won one and lost one, which put us both at 4-2 since we each lost the fight last weekend as well. So I'm coming in with a 2-game lead still, 34-26 compared to your 32-28.
Still got some ground to catch up on, and we're picking a lot of teams that I suck at picking. So, speaking of which, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're up first, and they're taking. It is setting in just how bad I'm probably going to do this week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are hosting the San Francisco 49ers at 1 p.m. this week. Both teams are as middle of the road as could possibly be, despite being two of the better teams pound for pound in the entire NFC. It's crazy the parity in the NFL this year. But both these teams really need this win, especially given their records and the way that this can impact playoff seeding and the playoff race later this season. The 49ers come in, they are 6-point favorites, or they opened as 6-point favorites. They're now 6.5-point favorites. And oh, by the way, one Christian McCaffrey is expected to play in this game, his first action of the 2024 season. All the while, Tampa Bay's offense has been absolutely nuked by injuries. You imagine Baker Mayfield's going to play, but Bucky Irvin is questionable. Chris Godwin is, of course, on IR. Jalen McMillan and Sterling Shepard are both questionable to play. Mike Evans is still hurt. Does Tampa Bay have enough juice behind Baker and his personality to withstand the 49ers invasion to Tampa this weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with the 49ers. I think even with or without Christian McCaffrey, doesn't matter how well he does. The bigger thing for me in this game is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and both Baker Mayfield and Bucky Irvin have yet to play or practice this week as of right now on Friday when we record this. So I can't be confident that all of their starters or even half of their starters are going to be out there. I got to go with the 49ers. I'm
confident Baker Mayfield will play. And he's got to be damn near dead to not take the field. Baker Mayfield's one of my favorite players in the NFL. But you simply don't have 22 Baker Mayfields out there to combat the 49ers, man. I think the 49ers are going to play with a little bit more juice, especially with McCaffrey just simply being in uniform. Even if he doesn't do Christian McCaffrey things in this game because he's still coming back, I'm with you. I'm going to take the 49ers.
All right, that moves us on to our second game of the week. We'll keep it in the NFL, and your team is on the clock again, Jacob. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 6-2 on the year, 3-1 on the road. They've done a fantastic job so far this year, regardless of what quarterback is in to play, is taking on one of the hottest teams in the league this year and is a total surprise to everyone. The Washington Commanders rookie quarterback sensation Jaden Daniels has done a fantastic job at coming in and turning this team around and helping them be successful. Will their success continue at home against your visiting Steelers, or the black and gold come in and show up with a steel curtain to shut these guys down?
So my confidence is placed in the fact that Mike Tomlin is 25-6 all time against rookie quarterbacks. And if memory serves, it's usually the bad ones that the Steelers lose to because of the opposing coach understanding how to avoid putting their rookie quarterback in a bad situation. Earlier this year, Bo Nix and the Broncos weren't able to pull it off. Bo Nix has been playing pretty good football. And trust me, it takes a lot for me to admit that. I'm not a Bo Nix guy at all. But Jaden Daniels has been on another planet. He is the offensive rookie of the year, and he deserves some MVP recognition as well. But he also has just not played a defense like the Steelers. His past 5 games, the Giants, the Bears, the Carolina Panthers, Baltimore Ravens, and Cleveland Browns. That's one good defense in 5 outings, DJ. I'm telling you, man, I'm not so sure how if the Steelers are going to control this game, but I do think they win this game on their defense, which is improved with Preston Smith coming in, and their offense likely having a little bit more firepower with Mike Williams out there opposite of George Pickens. I'm sticking with my team. Yes, I just threw Preston Smith in there as a dig at you.
All I got to say is Texas Walls to the good noops. I'm rocking with my frat bro. Mike Tomlin and the Steelers will definitely come out on top.
There we go.
Because we are men who achieve in every field of human endeavor, which includes coaching football. Give me the Steelers.
I like that. You should pick Steelers like that more often. Sunday Night Football, it's here on BCK, courtesy of Westwood One. The pregame activities get started at 7:30. Kickoff is at 8:20. It's also on NBC and Peacock, and it features the Detroit Lions and the Houston Texans. The Lions are on an absolute tear. They haven't lost since that Week 2 game to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they've looked fantastic both against bad competition and great competition. They've kind of been going back and forth on that a little bit, but this is one instance where it's good team against good team again. The Texans have struggled, though. They lost to the Jets last week. They lost to, 2 weeks ago. That was last week. Math's hard. And also lost to the Green Bay Packers a few weeks ago after, in between those games, struggling with the Indianapolis Colts, who are not a very good team. Things have been a little bit rocky for Houston, but they are far from a bad team. Can Detroit handle everything and have Zadarius Smith welcomed into the fold with a W? Who you got? Lions, Texans?
Oh, I got Lions all the way. This one for me comes down to the fact that Lions are almost an unstoppable force at the moment. And once again, playing another battered offensive team, even though they have been great at 6-3 this year, 4-0 at home. The Lions are also 4-0 on the road. Their one loss comes at Ford Field. I think they stay perfect on the road and continue to be one of the best offensive teams we have seen this season.
Going to be tough for me to have a bad week if I just keep picking all the same games as you. I'm also taking the Lions. I think they're going to run the ball very well. They'll avoid Will Anderson in that tenacious pass rush and they'll play ball control, and that's just going to make things harder on CJ Stroud. Force him to throw the ball a lot to a bunch of nobodies. It's going to be a bad day for Houston.
Now, Georgia, number 3 team in the country, 7-1, 5-1 in the SEC. Another SEC battle as they'll take on the Ole Miss Rebels, who are 3-2 in conference, 7-2 overall, 16th team in the country. Georgia opened at 2.5-point favorites. They are still 2.5-point favorites, as this game will be at Vaught Hemingway Stadium in Oxford, Mississippi. Does Jackson Dart and the rest of this defense have enough to stop Carson Beck and Etienne, or will the Bulldogs continue to stay in the top 5?
Boy, could you imagine if Jackson Dart played for the Georgia Bulldogs instead of Carson Beck? Georgia would be undefeated and there would be no stopping them, because Jackson Dart is significantly the better quarterback in this matchup. Carson Beck's gonna throw picks. It's what he's gonna do. I have no faith in Carson Beck, but the problem is that Georgia's defense is just too much. And as much as I love Lane Kiffin and I applaud the job he has done at Ole Miss to make them nationally relevant, they're quickly becoming the Penn State of the SEC, where every single time you believe in them, they drop the huge games that would send them over the top. And this one's going to be no different. I got to stick with the Bulldogs.
I'm also going to go with Georgia. I think this one comes down to the fact that I've seen Ole Miss lose 2 games that I feel like they shouldn't have lost. Mainly, especially like that LSU game. I think I picked LSU to win, but when you watch the way that game was played, Ole Miss gave them that game multiple times. Yeah. You look back at the Kentucky game that they lost. They handed that game to Kentucky as well. If you're going to be handing things away, you better not be handing stuff to Georgia, but I'm sure they will, and Georgia's going to take advantage of that.
We're headed to the Big 12. The Big 12 is interesting because BYU is undefeated in that conference. Iowa State only has 1 loss, and quickly behind them is Colorado. Don't look now. The Buffs are ranked number 20 and have shown significant improvement from last year's disastrous finish. The Buffs are actually in a position here to find themselves in the college football playoff. They do need to try to win this conference, and it's going to be tough to do that without Iowa State or BYU still on the schedule here in the closing weeks. But a win over Texas Tech would do them some good if they get some help between Iowa State or BYU. So Colorado headed out to middle of nowhere Texas to play the Red Raiders. DJ, who you got?
This one's simple for me. Colorado is coached by Prime. Shadur Sanders is out there throwing dimes, and Travis Hunter is as old as Father Time. Colorado and foe. Give me the Buffs.
I thought you were going to say is one of the greatest of all time. And I was going to be much more impressed than saying a 20-year-old is something akin to Father Time, or he's on the field all the time. Come on.
At the end of the day, it's all about the Buffs and foe.
I actually would be surprised if the game went to overtime, especially with you saying that. But I'm not going to do the dumb thing here. I'm going to take Colorado. I have zero faith in Texas Tech. That said, Texas Tech's offense can be very problematic. They have shown that even in losses. Their defense is so horrid, though. Losing to Baylor 59-35, losing to TCU, who is not who they were 2 years ago, 35-34. They can put up points, but they can't stop the other team from scoring. And Colorado can put up points, especially with those guys you mentioned Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. It's pretty absurd what they can do offensively, so I'm going to stick with Colorado.
Last game of the week. You're back on the clock, big guy. LSU 6-2, 3-1 in the SEC is going to be hosting your Crimson Tide, who are also 6-2, 3-2 in the SEC. Alabama did open up as 2.5-point favorites. They are still 2.5-point favorites. Are they going to go into Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge and come out on top, or will Jalen Milroe drop another game, this time to the hands of the Tigers?
Your boy's going to be stressed Saturday night. This is my favorite game. I don't know. I'm sure I've said it multiple times on the show before, but I don't hate LSU more than I hate Auburn. But man, I love playing LSU more than I love playing Auburn. The intensity of the rivalry reminds me so much of the Steelers and the Ravens, and the national impact that this game has. The team that loses this game is not going to the playoffs, and the team that wins it is right back into the thick of things with some help at the top of the SEC. There's a lot on the line here, and Alabama's just the better team. That doesn't mean they're going to win, but it's what I got to put my hope in. Jalen Milroe can get this thing done late in prime time. Got to hook up with Ryan Williams. You got to establish the run. You cannot allow Garrett Nussmeier to pick you apart. You got to put pressure on him to affect him, and if you do that, you can walk out of Death Valley with a win. We've done it before. Got to do it again. Roll Tide.
I really like LSU, but after the last couple of weeks, I've seen Garrett Nussmeier put them into some situations that they probably shouldn't be in. He's thrown some picks in some times where he shouldn't, and he's just been nervous at times. And I think Alabama will be able to dial up pressure that will make him nervous and force him into mistakes, which will eventually give Alabama a lead at some point. It may be at the very end of the game. I don't know, but I know when the clock hits zeros, Bama's going to be winning, which means they win the game. That means we're straight down the board. Bama, Georgia, Lions, Steelers, Colorado, 49ers. Let's enjoy, hopefully, a good weekend.
Yeah, I only do bad if you do bad. So I'm good with that. Even still, it could be a rough weekend because we just picked 3 games that I am heavily invested in. All right, it's going to be a fun week ahead. Michigan is going to take on, they're going to play Indiana at 3:30. So pregame festivities are going to get started at 2:30 here on WBCK later today. Tomorrow night, it's Lions, it's Texans, it's Sunday Night Football on BCK from Westwood 1. Pregame gets started at 7:30 for that. We've also got the Monday night matchup coming at you on Monday night, immediately following the coaches show for the Michigan Wolverines. Hey, anytime Matthew Stafford is playing in primetime, I figure some of you guys might want to listen out. So the Rams will host the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football here on BCK. Again, 7:30 is when those pregame festivities get started. We'll see you guys next week. Another programming update for next week, by the way. Bob the Gardener is going to be in for Coach's Corner while Bill takes a week off to prep for the basketball coaches. We'll get you Bob the Gardener ahead of Mitten Madness next week. That's at 9 a.m. and we'll follow at 10, and that's when we'll see you again. Take it easy.
Join Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Miss the show or want to run it back? Stream Mitten Madness on demand on the WBCK app. Sponsored by AirwayCashforJunkCars.com.